It is a unique form of diplomacy. There's no question about that. Whether it makes any sense is another matter. And I think it's quite clear it doesn't make any sense. I mean, the bottom line here is that Trump needs an exit strategy. He just has to put an end to this war sooner rather than later. And the reason for that is that he has no military strategy that he can turn to that can allow him to win the war. There's just no military option here. As we've talked about before, if you go up the escalation ladder, it's the Iranians who prevail, not the Americans. So there's just no military option. Furthermore, the world economy is teetering, and the longer this goes on, the more damage that's going to be done to the world economy. And by the way, if you do go up the escalation ladder, that'll really be another hammer blow to the world economy. And this has political consequences inside the United States for President Trump, not to mention the fact that it has huge economic and social consequences for countries all over the world. So he's under tremendous pressure to come up with some sort of agreement with Iran that allows us to walk away from this. The problem that he faces is that he's incompetent. The administration is incompetent when it comes to diplomacy. And the best example of this is a subject you and I have talked about ad nauseum, which is the Ukraine-Russia war. You want to remember that President Trump promised when he came into office that he was going to settle that war. And in fact, he said that he might even settle it before he moves into the White House. And he's made a complete hash of those diplomatic negotiations with the Russians. It's really quite remarkable, as you have recorded in a whole slew of different interviews with a variety of people over the past year or so. It's really quite amazing. So why would anyone expect him to be any more adept in negotiating with the Iranians than he has been in negotiating with the Ukrainians and the Russians? He's just not a good diplomat by any stretch of the imagination. And to add to the trouble, he's got to deal with Israel and the Israel lobby. And this is a very important issue, Glenn. The fact is that the Israelis understand that up to this point in time, we've lost the war. We meaning the United States and Israel. We had a set of goals going into the war, 4 main goals, as you know: regime change, getting rid of Iran's nuclear enrichment capability, getting rid of their long-range missiles, and getting them to stop supporting Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Houthis. We failed on all counts. And on top of that, as everybody knows, the Iranians, who did not control the Strait of Hormuz before February 28th and did not have a toll booth located in the middle of it, now control the Strait of Hormuz and have a toll booth located right there. So the Iranians have won. From an Israeli point of view, this is a disastrous situation because the Israelis view Iran as an existential threat. You and I can disagree with the Israelis, but that doesn't matter. They think it's an existential threat. And of course, the lobby here in the United States goes along with Israel no matter what. So the end result is that Israel wants to continue the war. It's just very important to understand that. They want us to continue hammering away at Iran to try to beat them into submission. And if we don't beat them into submission, well, we'll just destroy them. Do what we did in Gaza to Iran. That's the Israeli view, and that's the Israel lobby's view. So if you think about the situation in Ukraine, going back there, and then you think about the situation with regard to Iran, you see inept diplomacy on the part of the Trump administration in both cases. But in the case of Iran, the situation's even worse because you've got Israel and the lobby leaning on him not to come up with a peace agreement that reflects what's happening in the war, which is another way of saying which reflects the fact that Iran has won. done. So Trump is veering back and forth between two positions. One, which is pushed forward by the economic realities and the realities of what has happened in the actual fighting to work out some sort of deal. He has powerful incentives because of the state of the world economy and because of what's happened in the fighting to cut a deal. He understands he has no military option. He understands we've effectively lost, and he understands the damage that could be done to the world economy. That tells him, let's cut a deal. But on the other side, he has the Israelis and he has their minions here in the United States. And they are powerful and they're honeycombed throughout the entire administration to put enormous pressure on him not to cut a deal and instead to play hardball with the Iranians. So what you see him doing is wavering back and forth between these two positions. And in the end, we have been unable to get a ceasefire, much less meaningful negotiations started. You want to understand, we don't even have a ceasefire yet, because the ceasefire involved shutting down the fighting in Lebanon between the Israelis and Hezbollah, which has kind of been done. And number two, opening the Strait. And the Strait opened for one day, and then because President Trump wouldn't take off the American blockade of the Strait, the Iranians put the blockade back on. So we haven't even fulfilled all the conditions that were required for a ceasefire, much less began to move seriously towards an agreement. And all the time this is happening, the clock is ticking on the world economy. And this is a very dangerous situation.
Is it possible, though, with the ceasefire, that this could be a way for the United States to get Iran to fight the war on America's terms? Because this appears to be one of the things that has failed since the beginning. That is, when the U.S. attacked, it looked as if Trump would have favored to do a little bit of bombing and then stop. And the Iranians essentially didn't want to give him this kind of escalation control. And they made it clear that any attack would get a massive response. So shutting down the Strait of Hormuz, attacking the Gulf allies, essentially denying the U.S. this kind of escalation control. Now, in the ceasefire, seems to follow the same logic. Yes, initially, the U.S. appeared to agree to this 10-point plan, at least as a point of departure to start discussions. But then it seems to be this incrementalism. Well, the U.S. should be allowed to put a blockade on Iran. Israel should be allowed to bomb a little bit in Lebanon. U.S. should be able to seize or fire on some Iranian ships, and to keep it, I guess, low intensity. I mean, is it possible that it's just to get the war under control, or is it the ceasefire gone wrong? Because I think Iran will probably interpret this as a wider effort. Whatever minor escalation there's now, the overarching objective would be the effort to destroy their nation or wipe out their civilization, to use Trump's language. So do you think this has anything to do with how the war is fought, or just to bring it down, the intensity of it, and limit the targets that Iran are targeting?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. And let me give you my 2 cents on it. I think that what Trump wants to do here is he wants to use military leverage to get the Iranians to agree to a ceasefire and then to come to the negotiating table. And he wants to use that military leverage to get a good deal. Not a great deal. He's not going to get a great deal. He wants, I think, to get something that's better than the JCPOA when it comes to the nuclear enrichment issue. But he thinks, military leverage to do that. So let's talk about military leverage. My view is that any great power, I should say, has 3 levers that it can use, 3 military instruments that it can use to get what it wants, either through coercive purposes or by fighting the actual war. And 1 is air power, 2 is ground power or land power, and 3 is naval power. Those are the sort of 3 instruments that a state has. And we started the war on February 28th and waged it before the ceasefire, largely with air power. We struck Iran from the air, and we struck them with naval aircraft, but we didn't have a blockade on at that point in time. It was all about air power. And that air power campaign, Glenn, failed. And that's why you moved to a ceasefire. And that's why we can say today that up to this point, Iran has won the war. The air power campaign failed. And by the way, everybody knew, or let me put it differently, everybody should have known beforehand that air power alone was not going to defeat Iran. The historical record is clear here. So that's air power. Then there's ground power. And here we're talking about using ground forces for the purpose of invading Iran. This is not a serious option. First of all, we don't have many combat troops at all in the region. There's talk about 50,000 American troops in the region. Only a small slice of them are combat troops. And the idea that even if all of them were combat troops, you could invade Iran and do something to end this war is not a serious argument. We don't have the combat forces there to launch a ground invasion. Furthermore, President Trump is allergic to boots on the ground. Furthermore, the American people are not willing to tolerate the kind of pain that would be required if you're going to launch a full-scale invasion of Iran. Just think about how deeply concerned we were about the life of that pilot who was shot down, right? The idea that he might be killed was a horrible thought. Our tolerance for pain over the Iran war is not very high. The idea that you're going to launch a massive ground offensive into Iran, suffer lots of casualties, have soldiers coming back in body bags, that's just not possible. It's just not going to happen. And it seems to me that President Trump, although he occasionally hints at maybe a tiny ground force incursion, the ground force option is just not a serious option. So what I'm telling you is up to now, the air power option was tried and failed. We have no serious ground power option or land force option. And unsurprisingly, what have we turned to? We've turned to the naval option, and we have a blockade on the strait. And furthermore, we're running around the world hunting down ships carrying Iranian oil way out in East Asia or Southwest Asia. And the question you have to ask yourself is whether or not you think this blockade is going to bring the Iranians to their knees. And I would say to you, first of all, Glenn, if the blockade is such a war-winning weapon or is an effective war-winning weapon, why didn't we turn to it earlier? Why are we only turning to it now? And the answer is it's not a war-winning weapon. First of all, I don't think the U.S. Navy can sustain a blockade for a long period of time. We have a limited number of ships. The wear and tear on our ships is enormous. I think a lot of ships, based on what I read, are getting through the blockade. We run the risk at some point that the Chinese will escort ships into the Strait of Hormuz, which will put us in a very difficult position because then we'll have to face the fact that we might have to attack Chinese ships if we want to prevent those Iranian cargo ships or oil tankers from going into the Gulf. I mean, there's all sorts of trouble that one can imagine with this blockade. And I think very importantly, what you saw today is that the Iranians have captured two ships in the Persian Gulf. They've seized two ships in retaliation for the two ships that we have seized. So they're playing tit for tat. Moreover, the Iranians have made it manifestly clear that if you want to come back to the bargaining table, you have to put an end to the blockade. So at some point, Trump is going to have to end the blockade just to go back to the bargaining table. He can't dilly-dally forever and ever. We have to get negotiations going here. And that means he's going to have to take the blockade off at some point. But my previous point is the blockade's not going to be that effective. Is it going to inflict some pain on the Iranians? Yeah. But the Iranians have demonstrated that they have a high tolerance for pain, a much higher tolerance for pain than we do. So the naval option is not a war-winning option. We have no war-winning option. President Trump talks about sort of going back to air power. And a lot of people say, we're going to go in and bomb this and bomb that. That's not going to work either. If it was going to work, he would have done it. We tried bombing. It didn't work. What's the new formula that's going to allow us to succeed? Oh, we're going to go in and destroy all of their energy infrastructure and basically make Iran unlivable. That's not going to work. Everybody knows that because the Iranians can retaliate. So we're out of options. And what he has to do here is he has to get a ceasefire in place ASAP, and then they have to start negotiating. And he has to come up with a clever set of proposals that he can work on with the Iranians so that we can work out some sort of deal and shut this down as much as possible and rescue the international economy before it goes off a cliff.